B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Thursday, March 15th, 2018. Had a few computer glitches here at the secret studio today. I'm posting the podcast about an hour later than usual. And I'm tempted to blame Russian hackers, but I can't. However, the Trump administration is shifting its tone. It is joining the United Kingdom, Germany, and France in not only denouncing Russia and blaming it for the release of a nerve agent in Salisbury, England, that has threatened the life of a former Russian double agent. And this is a stunning reversal. Just the other day, as Trump was flying to California, he was kind of saying, well, we got to wait for some facts here. I got to talk to Prime Minister May. And, of course, the media, which is, deeply invested in the Trump-Russia narrative, is very sensitive to Trump's tone toward Russia. And they note that he didn't impose the sanctions that the Congress foisted on him last summer against Russia, and that he has generally only said nice things about Putin. So this is a dramatic shift. And my fear is that by joining this current campaign in demonizing Russia, that with all of the groundwork that has been laid in the Russiagate scandal here in the United States, and public opinion has been prepared for a confrontation with Russia, I see that looming with potentially disastrous consequences. And let me state once again that I am not an apologist for Vladimir Putin. And the circumstantial evidence indicates that once again, Russia has settled a score with a former spy. And there is history to support this. The problem is we don't have any actual evidence that the nerve agent used came from Russia. The British say, and we have to take them at their word, that the formula is very similar to the Novichok is what the series of agents are labeled with. And based on sources that I've read, these compounds can be created not in some secure weapons facility like Porton Down or Fort Detrick here in the United States, but in almost any laboratory where average agricultural fertilizers are created or prepared. So the statement that the United States has joined in says that Russia is responsible for a clear violation of international law. Trump said, I spoke with the Prime Minister. We are in deep discussions, a very sad situation. It certainly looks like the Russians were behind it, something that should never, ever happen. We're taking it very seriously, and I think many others. Sorry. So Trump is just reading what's in front of him. But the New York Times notes again their sensitivity. In keeping with his reluctance to blame Moscow for meddling in the 2016 election, Trump did not mention the sanctions or election interference. And until today, Trump's administration has refused to follow the Obama administration's expulsion of 35 Russian diplomats linked to the unproven claims of Russian election interference. And this is the fundamental problem. You may think that Putin is so clever and the Russians have been able to meddle in our election and almost kill this double agent and his daughter in England. But there are many other possibilities. And for these nations to unite against Russia at this critical juncture gives me great pause. Because I think we are creating a climate that could easily escalate into military confrontations. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and it's Treasury that manages sanctions, Quote, the administration is confronting and countering malign Russian cyber activity, including their attempted interference in U.S. elections, destructive cyber attacks, and intrusions targeting critical infrastructure. So the U.S. is now piling on to the alleged nerve agent usage in England. The sanctions target 5 Russian organizations, 19 individuals. Now, some of this directly parallels the people who have been indicted by Bob Mueller at the St. Petersburg troll farm. And I consider that to be laughable. To try to include the St. Petersburg social media operation with the attempted poisoning of the double agent and with the other hacks I'm about to enumerate is really ridiculous, and that's what sets off my bullshit detector here. They're trying to merge together various issues that don't all have the same weight. So, get this. Have you ever heard of the NotPetya cyber attack? Well, if you're scratching your head, you're not alone. This is the first I've heard of it. The Times reports, in addition to the election meddling, the attacks cited by the Treasury Department included the NotPetya cyber attack that caused billions of dollars in damage in the United States, Europe, and Asia in what the department called the most destructive and costly cyber attack in history. Huh? The United States and Britain formally blamed Russia for that cyber attack last month. Now, I'm not aware of it under these descriptions. I really don't know what they're talking about. Next, the Times says the administration also took the unusual step of naming the Russian government as the force behind a series of intrusions into American power plants and the computer networks that control power grids. The attacks, known as Dragonfly, pierced many layers of security, would have allowed the intruders to sabotage systems, but there is no evidence that any sabotage took place. Now, do we have evidence of these intrusions? Once again, we are left to trust our intelligence communities, which have lied to us repeatedly and which, in my view, have no credibility on anything related to Russia right now. It gets more confusing because Trump has been running these spy agencies for over a year now with his appointees. But my skepticism remains very strong. All right, one more quote here. These attacks have been known to the American government for more than a year, but kept highly classified. Symantec, which markets systems that detect malware and protect against it, issued a detailed report about Dragonfly in October of last year, but stopped short of naming the Russians. Were they waiting for CrowdStrike, the Russian specialists, to surface? Now, also, the nerve agent in question here, according to the British, is not a weapon that can be manufactured by non-state actors. But I've been reading blog posts by Craig Murray and others that indicate that the alleged beauty of these organic compounds is that they don't require a sophisticated weapons laboratory to concoct them. So I'll leave that as an undetermined matter, but again, my skepticism tends to rule. The joint statement came from Britain and its allies, and it says, quote, the use of a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia constitutes the first offensive use of a nerve agent in Europe since the Second World War. Now, hold on a minute. Didn't that guy Litvinenko die as a result of polonium poisoning occurring in England? Wouldn't that have been the first since World War II? That's my recollection. And the statement also said, we share the United Kingdom's assessment that there is no plausible alternative explanation, and note that Russia's failure to address the legitimate request by the government of the UK further underlines Russia's responsibility, because they failed to attempt to prove a negative? This is a very slippery slope. This is not based on real evidence. It's based on conjecture, allegations, and amplifying those allegations. Amplifying allegations is not proof. It's not evidence. It's just louder. So this complicates things, of course, for the Trump-Russia narrative here in this country. Chuck Schumer, Democrat leader in the Senate, said the fact the administration has issued sanctions against individuals and entities indicated by Special Counsel Mueller proves that his investigation is not a witch hunt, as the president and his allies have claimed. All right. So what does that get us? And if Trump is acknowledging these other activities by Russia, does it undermine his claims that there was no collusion? Or is this just a hall of mirrors where we really cannot sort out what the original is and what the reflection is? And a listener named Bob, and I won't give his last name because we got one guy named Bob who's a subscriber who wants to remain anonymous, so I'll say Bob J. dropped an email, said, Peter, would love to hear your thoughts on the podcast, why Russians did an attempted assassination with so many clues that pointed back to Russia, using a chemical that was easily traced to Russia and being sloppy with the attempt, using too much that injured first responder. Well, Bob, that's a great question, and I wish I had a clear answer for you. At this point, I can only speculate like anyone else, and I find that the timing of this is really curious. Putin is standing for re-election within the next week. Why would he want to muddy the waters with an incident like this and the reaction that it has produced? Maybe it strengthens him domestically as the guy who takes out traitors. But I really find this as suspicious as I did the Khan Shaykhun use of a nerve agent, allegedly sarin, in Syria last year that led to Trump's missile strike. And if I take your question, Bob, and turn it around, your question, in one sense, says somebody else probably did this. Why would Russians attempt an assassination with so many clues pointing back to Russia? And it's like the alleged hacking. We've been over this many times with many different guests, most recently Scott Ritter. The Russians are not sloppy spies. Scott Ritter knows that from his own service as a Marine intelligence officer in Moscow for 4 years. And so the questions linger. Meanwhile, Adam Schiff, the Democrat ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, has fired back, accusing his Republican majority of ignoring significant evidence of collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia, though he can't say if there has been criminal wrongdoing. Now, I take the Democrats' point. There's a lot more to investigate, and I support a full investigation of everything. And it's very clear that the Republicans, both Devin Nunes and Mike Conaway, who've been running the intelligence investigation, are Trump loyalists who don't want to find any facts that might show that Russia meddled in the election and favored Trump. But, of course, all we have is circumstantial information in public, and we have assertions and counter-assertions. Schiff went on to say the GOP report misleadingly characterizes events and paints a portrait and tells a story that could not have been better written if it was written in the White House itself. But so what? Explain to us what evidence exists that proves your contention. And as I pointed out yesterday, the Mueller investigation, which is turning up multiple cases of people who were gaming Trump for their own personal benefit, from the National Security Advisor to Paul Manafort to his son-in-law Jared, who is angling for loans to prop up his family's business empire. So I believe there's a scandal. I believe there's a cover-up. I believe Trump is impeachable. I just don't believe that there's enough evidence to support this collusion narrative. So as of Monday, Andrew McCabe, who has been the number 2 at the FBI, was planning to officially retire, and he would have put in enough time to collect a pension. And with the clock ticking, the FBI office that handles employee discipline has recommended firing Andy McCabe over allegations that he authorized the disclosure of sensitive information to a reporter and then misled investigators when he was asked about it. And because Trump has really targeted Andy McCabe, he asked him how he voted. He raised issues about McCabe's wife running for the state Senate in Virginia and accepting money from Terry McAuliffe. That makes her and Andy McCabe, by extension, tools of the Democrats and the Clinton empire. So the Inspector General at Justice, Michael Horowitz, has been working on a report that blasts McCabe for allowing two high-ranking bureau officials to sit down with a Wall Street Journal reporter as it prepared a report in 2016 on an investigation into the Clinton Family Foundation, and then allegedly misleading the Inspector General's team about his actions. Now, this would be not the first or the last official leak in Washington, D.C. And while I deplore the way the FBI handled the whole Clinton investigation, failing to investigate serious issues related to the foundation that crossed over to pay-to-play while she was Secretary of State, there are many serious issues there that the FBI and the Justice Department completely ignored. And so to take down Andy McCabe because he met with a reporter and it appears he leaked something, the nation has been awash in leaks since Trump was elected or selected. And so to punish Andy McCabe by essentially taking away his pension, that's what's at stake here, is a really dirty move. Expect Trump to execute it via Twitter. Andy McCabe's replacement, David Bowditch, appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee and acknowledged that the FBI blew it when it came to the alerts they got about Nicholas Cruz, the identified school shooter in Parkland, Florida. Says Bowditch, we clearly should have done more. And he had to sit through a recitation of the various tips that were reported to the FBI and also to the Broward County Sheriff's Office over many months. And Bowditch tried to explain these episodes, and then he made this, what I would call a fatuous comment, a promise of transparency that we will never have seen from the FBI. He said, when we make mistakes, we will not hide them, and we are committed with your help to doing whatever is necessary to correct our mistakes and prevent tragedies like this one from being repeated. What bullshit. Meanwhile, the nationwide student walkout occurred yesterday, and I applaud students in Florida and all across the country who stood up and made their voices heard. Now, I know some students feel they were coerced into participating in these events, and maybe that's true. But I do think it reflects the organic reaction of young people in this country to ongoing mass shootings and total inaction by our government. And I want to acknowledge that I support almost every gun control proposal out there. Assault weapons ban. I don't support expansion of concealed carry across state lines. I support deeper background checks than what we have today. And I also would tax ammunition and tax gun ownership as a way to bring insurance companies into regulating the use of weapons. That said, I can't think of any regulation or even all of the possible regulations that will change the gun culture in this country. And the fact that people see guns as the way to resolve disputes and conflict. And Trump will never lead us in any direction that addresses that culture. And that's what drives my cynicism about actual change, whether it's driven by young people or comes from anywhere else. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Susan Gavay right here in the Bay Area, Carl Howard in Columbus, Jim Garrison, and Bill Janetta. I thank you for your ongoing support, and I need to invite others to join in. Frankly, I've lost subscribers and my revenues are down, and I would like to change that with your help. So visit peterbcollins.com, find the menu tab, then click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and in just a minute or two, you can select the level of support that you're comfortable with. And if you are allergic to PayPal, I understand, you can drop a coin or $1 or a check in the mail to Box 150 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. That's Box 150 660, San Rafael, and the zipper 94915. Over at Shadowproof, I often mention Kevin Gostola, but he has a contributor there named Brian Sonnenstein who does a great job covering the prison industry in this country. And Sonnenstein's latest post today, I've linked to it in the show file for this podcast, covers the story of a woman who was sexually abused by a guard at an immigrant prison in Texas run by a corporate operator. And as a result, she sought mediation, and the agency, ICE, and the core civic operator of the prison agreed to a settlement in front of a judge in the District Court for Western District of Texas. And the agreement required the officials to provide the 23-year-old woman, Laura Monterosa, with outside mental health treatment on a weekly basis for post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And what did they do? They almost immediately tried to deport her. On March 14th, ICE attempted allegedly to force Monterosa to sign papers that would initiate her deportation, but she refused. And at the time of the deadline of this story, the immigrants' rights group Grassroots Leadership have holed up at the Austin campaign offices of U.S. Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Beto is running for the Senate there, and they are asking him to intervene with ICE. The 23-year-old woman is from El Salvador, and she went public with allegations of repeated sexual harassment and assault in November of last year. And since then, 2 more women have come forward with their own stories. All 3 say they have experienced retaliation. Yesterday, the Senate did a dirty, dirty deed, and a bunch of Democrats got on board with Republicans to upend the limited regulation of the Dodd-Frank bill that was passed after the economic meltdown of 2008. It is not Glass-Steagall. It never was. But despite that, Democrats joined with Republicans to promote amnesia over what led us to the meltdown of 2008 and to pave the way for it to happen again. So if you've got money in the market, if you've got a 401k or an IRA, be prepared to take a beating somewhere down the road, because this is reckless and risky. And they claim it's all about community banks, and we know that's total bullshit. It's about the big banks, and it's about freeing them from regulation that has not affected their profitability. And I want to take a moment here to name names. These are the Democrats who joined with the Republicans to pass this bill. And I want you to hold them accountable at a town hall meeting or even at the ballot box when you have the opportunity. Here they are. Senator Bennett of Colorado, Carper of Delaware, Coons of Delaware, Donnelly of Indiana, Hassan of New Hampshire, Heitkamp of North Dakota, Jones of Alabama, not a surprise, Kane of Virginia. Angus King is an independent, but we'll mention him. He's a senator from Maine. Back to the Democrats, Manchin of West Virginia, McCaskill of Missouri, Nelson of Florida, Peters of Michigan, Stabenow of Michigan, Shaheen of New Hampshire, Tester of Montana, and Warner of Virginia. And these people deserve to be held accountable for what they've done. They are aiding and abetting the next meltdown of our economy, and I'm really sorry to see it happen. There's also a new update about Wells Fargo, the embattled bank that was caught fraudulently opening accounts for customers in order to meet sales quotas for underpaid bankers? Well, according to a new report, Wells Fargo is also a major funder of the gun industry. They provide a big line of credit to the parent company of Smith & Wesson. They've profited off working with the NRA, having given the gun lobby a $28 million line of credit. Now, they picked up the account when they acquired the Wachovia Bank in 2008, but they renewed the relationship in 2014, lending $22 million to the NRA, and they also work as the collection agent for the subscription and membership dues and other revenues that pour into the NRA. So in addition to the fake account scandal, we know that Wells Fargo funds private prison operators, including CoreCivic, the one I just mentioned in Texas. They have $20 million invested in CoreCivic. They also are a major funder of the fossil fuel industry. They collaborate with the police, for example, on that secret aerial surveillance program in Baltimore. And that's not all. They were one of the biggest banks to help precipitate the financial crisis with their huge mortgage portfolio back in 2008. And speaking of sexual abuse, the case of Cardinal George Pell is continuing in Melbourne, Australia. They have had preliminary hearings where alleged victims offered testimony. A judge will determine if this meets the standard to go to trial. But it's been 5 years since Francis became Pope. He promised zero tolerance for sexual abuse, and he continues to allow people like Cardinal Pell to keep his robe. And there is the case in Argentina, it's Chile, where he has been defending a cleric who is clearly vulnerable to these charges of at least covering up for sexual abuse by priests. There's a great story published a couple of days ago at The Intercept under the byline of Li Feng and Zaid Jilani. And I want to commend Li Feng. He is a very good, detailed, muckraking reporter. And together with Dar Jamail and two other reporters, he was named as a recipient of the I.F. Stone Award, the Izzy Award, this year. And I congratulate Lee and Dar on their achievements. But this new story, I'm linking to it, is worth reading. What they show is that across the country, we have elected leaders who talk about how they're champions of free speech when it comes to protecting the right of, say, Milo Yiannopoulos to disrupt a campus and give a speech. But these same people who want to go to great lengths to protect the speech rights of right-wingers don't feel the same way when it comes to those of us who speak up in support of boycott, divestment, and sanction aimed at Israel. So, here's one legislator they profile. Leah Vukmir is a state senator, a Republican in Wisconsin. A champion of free speech issues, reads a press release from ALEC. She got the Iron Lady Award for taking tough stands. But just months before that, she sponsored an anti-BDS law in Wisconsin, prohibiting the state from entering into contracts with businesses that choose to express themselves by engaging in a boycott. They talk about Texas Republican State Senator Van Taylor, and they crisscross the country, including Ohio, Georgia, and Iowa. I encourage you to take a look at this. It's quite an overview of the suppression of specific speech aimed at Israel in this free speech nation. So we know that Trump has he's been proven to issue at least 2,000 false or misleading claims publicly as president. And last night, at a fundraiser in Missouri, he said that he made up something when he talked to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. He claimed he made up the assertion that the U.S. had a trade deficit with Canada. Now, why Trump would choose to brag about his attempt to buffalo the leader of a neighboring country is beyond me. Because Justin Trudeau already knows that Trump bullshitted him. And I'm sure that it will affect his impression of Trump going forward. And Trudeau might even have shared that with other leaders of different nations. But for Trump to brag about this, as he wants to break up the Iranian nuclear deal and make a nuclear deal with North Korea, it shows that he doesn't care about his credibility. And it's because I think he has no internal sense of credibility. He just says whatever is convenient at the time. And so this now proven lie just gets added to the pile of the thousands of others. And finally today, I want to honor the life and contributions of T. Barry Brazelton. He died yesterday at the age of 99 on Cape Cod, and he was the baby doctor who kind of succeeded Benjamin Spock. And he was less of a tough love guy and more of a sweet-talking parent figure. And I just want to share briefly, I had one encounter with Barry Brazelton. It's about 15 years ago. I was producing a nonprofit radio program aimed at parents, and we had Barry Brazelton on as a guest. And he said, hey, let's get together. So together with the host of that show and some of the other people from the nonprofit, we went to the most expensive place in San Francisco to get a drink. And the good doctor, who was well into his late 80s at that point, he knocked back 2 martinis in the time it took me to finish a glass of wine. And guess who picked up the check? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Brazelton. And thank you for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.